Welcome to In Our Own Defense Podcast. We're your hosts, Attorney A.D. Winters, Managing Attorney and founder of VeteransDefender.com, and Dr. Dolores Tarver, licensed psychologist. For more information about our show, go to In Our Own Defense on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and just email us at inourown.defense@gmail.com. The purpose and mission of our show is to share truths and create a dialogue that increases our listeners' awareness of a variety of concerns to foster the development of a holistic plan which incorporates mental, physical, spiritual, financial, and intellectual wellness. Dr. Tarver.
The information provided during the In Our Own Defense podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice and is not a substitute for the knowledge, skill, and judgment of qualified mental health or medical health care professionals. Instead, all information, content, and materials that we discuss are for general informational purposes only.
Well, Dr. Tarver, in this episode of In Our Own Defense podcast, we are featuring two polished providers so they can come here and talk with us and discuss relationship strategies, ones that work. So how have you been, Dr. Tarver?
I have been great. How are you?
Oh, I've been well. And so this is another great episode of In Our Own Defense podcast. We're lucky to have these two great guests with us. You know, one of the things that I keep running across, whether it's in a movie, whether it's in a TV show, is I keep running into people having difficulties dating in real life and social media and everything that you hear. I know I've had challenges, but I think it's necessary and required to know your future partner. But what are some of the challenges that you've seen? I know it was different when I was a youth than a young adult. The whole dating scene changed as I became a middle age. But I wonder, as people enter their senior stages of life, our views naturally change and progress about things, whether it's fear, pain, what are the things that make a dating relationship that you prioritize in those relationships? And how do we know if we're ready to date? I know there was 15 questions.
You like to do that to me.
But I wanted, to bring that to the fold. What are your thoughts on that?
Of course, we can't get away from this whole dating conversation. As you said, it's everywhere. I think for a lot of the clients that I see, some of the challenges end up being dating when you haven't healed from a past relationship or past relationships. So you're bringing in some of that pain into your current relationship with your partner, and you begin to engage in comparison behaviors. That's another one that I see, where we compare past partners to current partners, and it makes a partner feel like they can't win. So a lot of times partners will come to me and say they feel like they're living in the shadow of another relationship. I think sometimes we get into dating because we're bored and we are looking for fillers. We might have holes in our own lives, and I say holes in our souls from our past family dynamics, and we're trying to use a partner to fill that, or we don't want to be alone. I hear a lot of people say, I can't be by myself. And I'm like, you can't be by yourself, or you're choosing not to be by yourself. And then, of course, I think this challenge of people wanting to have someone to be with, but not really being sure about what that's supposed to look like. Because if I haven't done real well with dating in the past, then I might be a little bit uncomfortable with trying to date in the future. So I think some of those dynamics come into play, and I am super excited that we have two professionals with us today that are going to help us navigate all of those challenges, as well as some other ones that we'll be getting into. So why don't you go ahead and let's start with some introductions and get this thing going.
All right, well, good deal. Like Dr. Tarver said, guys, I get the privilege of introducing Miss Janay Johnson. She's an LMFT, and she's an award-winning therapist, school consultant, entrepreneur. She's an author and a speaker. She owns Teen Talk, a therapy practice that supports teens and their families and their school systems. And she's a co-founder of the Black Brain Campaign, which is designed to eradicate Black mental health stigmas. And she's the author of the Dear Teen Self series and teen self-help books that helps teens navigate some of these challenging emotions. She's contributed to the Forbes, The Culture, to break the barriers and highlight the cultural diversity. She's sought after speaker on all the time. She's written or been featured in Black Enterprise, ThriveWorks, Essence, and the Philadelphia Tribune. We're so lucky and so grateful to have Miss Janay Johnson. Welcome to the show, Miss Janay. And Dr. Tarver, if you can introduce our next guest, please.
It is my sincere pleasure to introduce Curtis Jasper, Ph.D., affectionately known as Dr. Kurt, who identifies himself as an author, speaker, educator, and human behavior specialist. That's a whole mouthful for you. He uses psycho-spiritual and psycho-educational approaches to teaching individuals, groups, couples, and families. He comes from a culturally based, non-colonized, for those of you that like Black Panther, therapeutic approach to focusing on Black men issues, mental health, and emotional wellness. He is the executive director of I Am International, Inc., a Georgia-based organization which teaches personal development, emotional intelligence, and health and wellness to community-based organizations. Dr. Kurt also heads Concierge Counseling Solutions, a mobile and virtual therapy corporation. He works, rests, and plays in Atlanta, Georgia. So welcome, 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 Dr. Kurt.
Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. We are so happy to have you two. And I like to just launch right into questions and just, y'all don't get any warm up. We're just about to get into it.
Okay.
So let's just start with what it actually means to date. A lot of people ask me, what exactly is dating? Is it hooking up? Is it friends with benefits? Is it bae? Is it cuffing? Is it DTF? What exactly is dating? And what would a healthy dating relationship look like? We'll start ladies first with Ms. Johnson.
All right. So I personally think that dating is what the two parties communicate it is. I think so many people have their own identity and their own thoughts about dating, and that's fine. I think you just have to be able to communicate that effectively to the person that you're interested in to see if they agree with that version of dating, so that in the very beginning, we talk about being healthy. You're communicating your needs, your desires, your definitions, and you're not pulling someone on board to a ship that they don't agree with being on. They don't know that that's what it looks like. And I think dating is it's a very personal thought process. It's a very personal decision. So I do think dating can be all of the things you mentioned. It could be a situationship. It could be, DTF. I mean, ideally, those are not traditionally what dating is and courting is. It's really like getting to know someone, asking them a bunch of deep, background questions to see if, you guys can be paired and partnered for the long term. And honestly, I think we have to do a deep dive with what the traditional idea of dating and courting and the end goal is, because the reality is a lot of people are not aiming for marriage anymore. And they're not aiming for those things and don't see those things as achievement. And so I think we have to kind of look at that to really understand what dating is and what's considered healthy. So it's kind of a layered question, but I definitely think we have to have like that, bigger kind of conversation first, because I think the purpose for dating then changes, which then would change the definition. Hopefully that made sense.
That made perfect sense, because we actually have been talking about relationships for a couple of weeks now, and that whole let's define what we're doing thing seems to keep coming up again. Dr. Kurt?
So first of all, thank you guys for having me. Dating for me is a couple things. So generally speaking, dating is just an intentional series of actions or behavior designed for one or more people to get to know each other. But then there's dating after a relationship has been established as a form of staying connected, that the end goal is to move to some level of intimacy. And so that is even further designed and defined by the people involved, whether it's open, close, every other week, online, things of that nature. What really stands out for me regarding the definition of dating is to be relatable, right? And I know we're going to get into some questions regarding relationships, but the notion of dating, whichever definition that we choose to use, there has to be a series of skill set acquisition that is designed that one must be relatable as they go through these intentional engagements.
You just breaking some theory on in there on the time. Okay, all right.
Relatable skills acquisition.
This is why we bring in experts to have these conversations.
Love it.
I appreciate both of your responses, and they seem to be on par, which is, hey, we need to have a conversation. We need to be clear about what we're doing before we enter into. And I like this piece of it changes as we move more into getting into a relationship. So the
Absolutely.
early dating where we're getting to know each other, and then as we establish what we're doing, then we may have a different set of guidelines in terms of how we want to proceed moving forward. Okay.
Absolutely.
All
And I
right.
think after we define it, I think it naturally leads us into a space where we're in today's society. We're still experiencing COVID. Who would have thought that when we first started this show, that on about the 20th episode, we would still be experiencing COVID-19. One of the things that is coming out of this is that people are starting to date, or that myriad of just definitions and terms that we use to define this that we know as dating. People are starting to engage in this digital space. This is a norm. We're constantly online. It's really the great way for us to communicate and connect safely. Because I don't know who's brave enough to say, "Hey, I'm coming over your house," and then your house, and your house, and you ain't coming to mine. And so, what is the norm in dating? And does this social media, this digital space, does it make it easier? Is it safer? Or is it just rife with, the frauds and the schemes and the scams, and people say, if you give me $400, I could turn it into 4,000 or all this, these Ponzi schemes. But what are some norms that are happening from this? I'll pose it to you, Dr. Kurt, first, and then you, Ms. Johnson. But what are some norms to help us navigate this?
Well, I think we're all in a new norm, and it's almost to the point when I work with couples that we quite frankly, people have forgotten about what used to be normal as we are all transitioning and transforming. I work with couples all the time, and there's some great things about being quarantined when it comes to preliminaries regarding dating. So we get to do this. I think before we interact, hook up, whatever the dynamics is, we get to see one another through some sort of virtual interaction, which allows us to kind of put forth to, some getting to know each other. I always joke and say, if you ain't Googleable, I ain't fooling with you. So I got to be able to put something about you in the search engine so my people can get to you in the event that I come up missing. But seriously, I think the quarantine has forced us to really not only deal with ourselves, but sort of lay a lot of foundational work, whether we're FaceTiming or Zooming or Skyping, whatever, even with people we've met. Now, the good thing about social media is most people are pretty active on some form of social media. So we don't get to know them, but we get a sort of a one-dimensional take on how they show up. Professionally, friends or family, dress, attire, smile, things of that nature. So it's sort of like a building process. You can meet people on social media, then y'all can move to Zoom, which is sort of a lot more private. And then, you can decide to meet in the park, 6 feet apart with masks on. So I think there's some goodness that have come out of this. And I think the new normal will set a precedent on how we date. Like, look, I got to Zoom with you. I got to Zoom with you first. Even when they open the world back up, I'm thinking there's some goodness about, let me send you the Zoom link.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting question. Something when you think about it, because it's going to have a lasting effect. Would you agree, Ms. Johnson?
Yeah, I actually do agree. And I think that dating during COVID has been really fun for most people, because I do think it gives you an opportunity to relieve the pressure. And it really gives you an opportunity to review what society has kind of put on, as a priority for dating. And now it's like, well, if that's not a priority, the priority is not kind of going out to a nightclub or putting on this type of attire, but the priority is now, all I can do is talk to you. I'm more interested. And Dr. Kurt said, you're laying foundation. You're having conversations about things early on that you probably were not having conversations about at all. And you're getting an opportunity to see, does that person, what their values are. In a world of social media and everybody's home, people are posting, you're seeing what they're reposting, you're seeing what they're not posting. You get an opportunity to really see where their values align. And I think it really allows the weeding process to happen quicker. And I also think it allows us to see people in a different way that we may not have paid attention to before. So I have been finding, and I encourage a lot of my friends to revisit, maybe connections from the past. Not if they were like, violent or anything, but just people that you probably didn't give a second glance to. Because I do think in different, phases of our lives, we may be more ready in others or less ready in others. But if you're in COVID and you're a little bit more mature, this person is still around, it doesn't hurt to give someone that you already have a connection with a deeper look and see if a deeper connection can really be fostered. So
I think that's fascinating. And I always wondered how like in this social space that we're operating in, if the families have some impact on this. I know, Dr. Tarver, you and I were talking in an earlier show when we were talking about toxicity. We were talking about the family's tendencies to weigh heavy on relationships. What are you seeing in the practice, generally in the practice, about families' impact on these dating norms?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, a challenge of dating, is that we often bring other people into our dating. And so whatever dysfunction is in our families, then we're tending to follow that in our dating patterns. And so what I'm seeing from clients is they date like their parents dated, or they date like their aunts and uncles dated. And I'm using the term date loosely because I think that there were a lot of non-described situationships and other kind of dynamics that people saw. And so they don't know how to date for themselves because they're following these patterns that they saw that may not necessarily have been healthy dating patterns. And I think that's a good segue into my question for you all, because I think sometimes we end up getting in dating relationships because our family pressures us to, right? Like, oh, I need some grandbabies. Shouldn't you be dating? What's wrong with you? You gay? How come you don't have anybody yet, right? So then people start getting in relationships because people say they should at this point in their lives. We've mentioned the different phases of our lives, or people end up getting in relationships because they're thinking, well, why not? Why not be in a relationship? I don't have anything else to do. Other people, I've heard people say, my ovaries are working. I might as well do something with it. Like, these are real conversations that I have with people. They're bored, they're lonely, right? So what are some of your recommendations for our viewers who may be thinking about some of those things as reasons for them to date, or the family of origin, as Attorney Winter said, influencing them to date? What are some of the things that you would recommend as factors to consider before they even begin this process of starting to date?
Whew. So I feel like that's really layered, but I think one of the first things is what you said, is kind of really taking that time to look at your family of origin and look at if those relationships that you are, striving for ended or manifested the way you want your relationship to manifest or to be. I think it's really easy to kind of take on our family dynamic, and because if there's ease there, it's hard being the first one to go left when everyone has gone right. But I think we always feel, oh, I don't want that for myself. The people are just kind of like, I'm not sure how to get there if I haven't seen it. So the first thing I would say is find examples of the life you want, of the relationship that you want. And if you find those examples, dig in. If you can, read more books from that person, if you feel like there are more topics on it, dig in and find and figure out, how did this person, get to this point? Because that's where I want to be. And I think so often when we look at relationships, we don't look at it like an educational opportunity, that there are guidebooks out here, that there are different things, there are people you can go to help you kind of navigate. So I think that's the first thing, really looking at your family and saying, is this the end goal that I also want to have? Because more than likely, you're going to get the same end goal if you do the exact same thing that your family has done. And to those that are bored, I mean, dating can be fun. So I'm not going to sit here and act like dating isn't fun or isn't fun. It can be, but I always say, date your friends, date yourself, find other things to do. I love to still date my friends, and if I want to go to a botanical garden, I'm going to go. I'll take myself, or I'll ask my friend if she wants to go. So I think we can still date if we feel lonely, because there's nothing wrong with connection. But I do think we should look at, where is the investment in the connection, so that I'm not, kind of pulling in another person's, feelings in case it doesn't go wrong, if it doesn't go well, and, just doing it because I'm bored. So that would be my suggestion on that.
Outstanding. What about you, Dr. Kurt? How are you?
So I want to answer it in twofold. Of course, there's the family coercion that comes up. A lot of people are very close to their family. A lot of people are not. It usually comes up with people whom I know or work with who have been in active relationships for a long time. In the family pressure, like, what y'all gonna do? What's going on? Particularly now during the quarantine. It's like, okay, y'all been dating 3 years before the quarantine. Like, how y'all coming out of this? So the family pressure on current relationship has sort of increased from my experience. And I work with it, and it causes stress and anxiety. And so by the time they come to me to do work on stress and anxiety, I have to peel back the layers. Like, okay, so we got to deal with the people pleasing, because this ain't the first time they have inserted themselves into your life. This is the first time you're coming to terms with that because of COVID, because we're all less mobile. So I often go back to, your folks been on you about a lot of things: where to go to school, where to live, how to dress, when you're gonna have kids, and so dating is just one other thing that there's, quite frankly, is exceeding your boundaries. And then the other people who are just quarantined, they are struggling with the notion of being alone versus being lonely. And so they make lonely be something more than just a human interaction. Like, we all have this desire, as you guys know, to be seen, heard, and felt. They make that to be like, maybe I'm going through something. No, we all get to that point, but it doesn't constitute a whole big thing about, I'm in this space, let me go and start liking and DMing folks. I do think there's some value in going back and sort of checking the temperature on some things you may have skated through. But I also think that this is a fun time to just be with people, whether virtually or online. Just be, because I know that all of us have had time to sit back and like, okay, I'm really getting to know myself. So there's a way to go through this, like, hey, I found out a lot of good stuff, I found out a lot of garbage stuff, and I'm ready to not only date people who I'm interested in, but as you said, Ms. Johnson, I'm actually ready to show up differently and date people who I'm already in relationships with, same gender, same sex, and things of that nature. So I look at it from those different angles.
I think that's an exciting way to kind of put it in perspective. And I think we all are learning to just, watch that loneliness, but don't get so bogged down with our familial relationships and those pressures, which are oftentimes unrealistic. But there's a couple more things I want to get to, but I know we need to take a little small break. But when we come back, I want to talk about location. You're listening to In Our Own Defense podcast, and we're having a great show on Am I Ready to Date with Dr. Kurt and Ms. Johnson. Dr. Tarver and I will be right back right after this message. Thank you so much. 5,